You're listening to the Cybercrime and Business Podcast, the weekly podcast that's focused exclusively on how the world of cybercrime is impacting business. This episode is brought to you by Surfwatch Labs. Surfwatch Labs delivers cyber risk intelligence solutions that help organizations understand the potential for cyber attacks, determine the impact to their business, and proactively address threats head-on. Hello, today is November 28th, 2014. I am Jeff Peters, HackSurfer editor, here with Matt Leifus, HackSurfer writer, and Eric Severson, Surfwatch Labs data analyst. A little bit later at the end of the podcast, we have an interview with Rob DiNuzzo. He's the marketing manager for Siber Systems, and they have some cybersecurity tips that they shared with us. I guess to kick it off, today is Black Friday, so that's sort of the holiday shopping season has officially kicked off, and I think that's kind of interesting just because over the last couple of weeks on HackSurfer and elsewhere, there's just been a lot of articles about, what's going to happen this holiday season in terms of, cybercrime and retail breaches and things like that. And now we're kind of officially into that season, so we get to sort of see what happens over the coming month. But one interesting aspect I wanted to quick chat about is I did a interview with Encapsula a couple days ago, and they were just talking about Cyber Monday and e-commerce and DDoS attacks and things like that. And I think that's something that's sort of been lost in the discussion, just with so much focus on the retail breach side. For example, Cyber Monday last year, there was $2.3 billion in online sales. So obviously there's a lot of transactions and there's a lot on the line for businesses. But Encapsula was able to share some interesting data with us. I guess, I don't know if people are aware of Singles Day. I wasn't really aware of it, but it's actually the biggest online shopping day in the world, even bigger than Cyber Monday. Happens on November 11th. 1111 is where Singles Day comes from. Some of the Chinese customers that Encapsula deals with actually saw 100 plus gigabytes per second attack, DDoS attacks, kind of sustained over a 5-hour period. And so they're sort of using that sort of Chinese Singles Day example as what could possibly happen here on Cyber Monday in the U.S. So we spoke to Tim Matthews, and he was just talking about how they really expect these competitive DDoS attacks to increase, where you try to, if you're number 3 on Google, you try to knock offline, the number 2 competitor on Google, who's maybe above you, so you can steal some of their traffic. And he said he expected a lot of that to happen today, Black Friday, Cyber Monday, any other major, shopping holidays. And then he also said that they expected ransomware or ransom DDoS attacks to increase, just because a lot of these e-commerce sites do a lot of their business for the year, really, in this short little period. So it's kind of a prime time for people to sort of try to extort people by saying, we're going to knock you offline unless you pay us, this small amount of money. So I just thought that was interesting, that the DDoS side's kind of been missing, I think, in that conversation. So yeah, Matt, I don't know if there's anything that really was interesting to you this week. I know you wrote an article about a phone scam that kind of came your way. Maybe you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. Last weekend I was sitting with my family watching football and, just enjoying my time. And I got a phone call, and it was pretty frightening because as a cybersecurity writer, I was almost duped. And I wanted to point it out for all of our listeners and readers. It was a scam involving this criminal called my phone and played off like he was from my credit card and was offering me an opportunity to lower my interest rate on my card. The scary thing about it was how he was able to give himself some credibility by knowing information like how long I had my credit card, and probably through targeted guessing, guessed my interest rate. So this was a real scam that I probably talked to him for about a minute and a half before I realized, okay, this probably isn't real. And so I ended up started asking him some questions to provide evidence that he was actually from my credit card. Turns out it was fake, and I was very close to possibly giving a hacker or a criminal my information. So it's kind of what I would call a dumb thing that I've done in terms of my security. That article, of course, is on HackSurfer, so you guys can check it out if you want to possibly learn anything from it. Yeah,
I guess kind of going off that theme of just kind of dumb things that we've done. I think that's kind of interesting just to talk about, too, because I think there's a certain segment, I guess, when I first joined sort of writing about cybercrime, there's a certain segment that I think really sort of looks down on the customers and, kind of says, oh, it's all their fault. And, that's kind of the reason why, they have all these security problems is people, which I agree with to an extent. But, I think of myself just a couple years ago, I was one of those stupid people. I remember, I think it was like 7th grade. This is the first time I ever had to come up with a password. I think, Matt, you had probably the same teacher as me, Miss Grunewald, and because we went to the same high school for people who don't know. But I was sitting in there to come up with a password, couldn't think of anything. I looked out the window and I saw Pine Tree. So Pine Tree was my password pretty much from 7th grade all the way till I was probably 25 for every single account ever. I mean, now granted, this was before online banking and stuff, before I was doing that, so there's a little bit of less risk involved, but I just think it's kind of interesting how, we all sort of do kind of rather stupid stuff until we sort of wake up to, the right way we should do things.
It wasn't quite as bad because I had 2 passwords that I would use. I had one for the really important stuff that I never told anybody, but it's still the same password for banking and email, and that's a problem. So, got a password manager now, got off that practice a couple years ago, and don't do it.
Yeah, I suppose we can kind of maybe look at some of the top stories this week, Matt. Is there anything that everyone else is talking about that we should discuss?
Yeah, when we were looking at the numbers, Jeff, we saw 2 stories that kind of peaked into the top trending targets. So we're going to start off with Microsoft. Microsoft has been in the news lately. Some of it, they're just related because of products they offer. Probably the biggest thing was last week, Microsoft pushed out an emergency security patch to plug a security hole in all their supported versions of Windows. This update addresses a bug in the Windows component called Microsoft Windows Kerberos KDC. And this handles authenticating Windows PCs on local networks. That was exclusively from Microsoft. That's definitely driving some of the chatter around them. On top of that, we have 2 other stories with Microsoft. This hacker group called Derp Trolling claims to have stolen 7 million usernames and passwords from the PlayStation Network, 2K Games, and Windows Live. We're not quite sure if that's actually true, if it's been proven false or not. I'll actually let you guys kind of discuss that because you probably know a little bit more about it than I do. Then we have Adobe Flash Player. They released another Flash patch that's available for systems like Linux, Mac, and then again for Microsoft Windows.
Yeah, I guess in terms of that derp trolling story, Sony, I think, put out a statement, and I believe Microsoft did too. Basically said, the Sony statement said, we have investigated the claims that our network was breached and found no evidence that there was any intrusion into our network. I'd be inclined to believe them just because of the name of the hacking group, Derp Trolling. I assume that, they're probably just putting together some fake list of usernames and passwords or whatever it is that they're putting out there. So I'd be inclined to believe that nothing really happened and it was just a hoax. But then again, I haven't, heard anything official either way other than the denials from Microsoft and Sony.
Yeah, I would say it looks like it's just been cobbled together from other data breaches, but the fact remains there have been a lot of data breaches around gaming and PlayStation Network especially, so it probably wouldn't hurt to change your passwords, especially if you've heard from these people before.
Yeah, so I know Microsoft got a lot of discussion and was one of the top trending targets according to Surfwatch Labs data. Is there anything else out there that was getting a lot of attention this week?
Yeah. The Sony Corporation was actually, and this is actually revolving around Sony Pictures. Sony Pictures was a victim of a breach that was perpetrated by this hacking group, #GOP, which stands for Guardians of Peace. These hackers warned Sony that they had top secrets in the company and they were going to threaten to release them if their demands weren't met. The biggest thing here is this hacking group is claiming that they have accounting information, email archives, film budgets, and even copies of passports for actors. So kind of some serious information that they're potentially holding on to. Are we clear on what it is that they're looking for? Have we seen anything in the news about that?
The group Guardians of Peace has made some really nebulous statements about equality and things that they expect from Sony, but it doesn't seem like they've made any concrete demands, at least publicly. But then again, Sony has not really confirmed the details of this attack. All of this is claims and leaks and a few comments from anonymous employees. So maybe they've made clear demands to Sony, or maybe they're just some crazy folks. But everything I'm seeing points to this attack being fairly legitimate. There have been some Twitter hijackings of Sony-related accounts, some preliminary leaks, several statements from anonymous low-level employees saying they can't use their company emails and that everything's been locked down for the week. So the company hasn't said anything except that they've got some kind of IT issue. So until they decide to be a little more forthcoming or all these files get leaked, I guess we'll just have to see how it plays out.
One thing that I did see is a person connected to the hack was quoted as saying, Sony didn't lock their doors physically, so we worked with other staff with similar interests to get in. So there's been some speculation that, if the attack is legit, that it was an inside attack. And I guess one other interesting thing to point out is Sony just always seems to be in the news. I mean, I don't know if it's just these hacktivists really hate Sony or what it is. I'm thinking back to, I believe it was late August when Sony Online Entertainment President John Smedley, he was on an American Airlines flight that got grounded because I think it was Lizard Squad tweeted out a bomb threat or said that there was bombs on the plane. They've had DDoS attacks take down, their networks, even going back, to like previously with Anonymous, there was big attacks against Sony. So just kind of interesting the level of, passion hacktivists have against Sony. I find that kind of interesting. So those were the big stories this week. I guess moving on to our cyber tip of the week. Do you have anything for us, Matt?
Well, one thing I think we should talk about, this was a story that happened this week. An IBM spokesperson said that they mentioned Citadel malware, which some of us may have heard about in the past. Citadel malware is now targeting password managers. So password safe, KeyPass, the Nexus personal security client. But it's important to point out that Citadel can easily reconfigure to target any other password manager as well. Jeff, I don't know if there's anything you want to say about that. That kind of big news, kind of scary, just a new threat out there.
Yeah, that definitely caught my mind because, I started using a password manager recently, and I think everyone, should use a password manager. But yeah, I guess what they're doing is they're targeting the master passwords because for those who don't know how password managers work, you basically have one mastered password and that stores, all your other passwords for different sites. So you can have a unique password for each site. So the interview we have coming up is actually with Rob DiNuzzo of Siber Systems, but they actually have a product called RoboForm, which is actually one of the most popular password managers. So I emailed him after we did our interview and asked his thoughts on this, and he emailed back, based on the internal reviews that we've done thus far, it does not look like we are currently affected by it. That said, we will continue to investigate and ensure we're taking any steps necessary to protect users' data. So yeah, I think the big thing is just to be aware that, even if you're doing the proper things like having a password manager, that's only one sort of step in the chain. You still want to try to put two-factor authentication on it and kind of have defense in depth.
Yeah, there are multiple steps you could take. Certain managers like KeyPass, which was mentioned, I use KeyPass, it defaults to only storing the password vault locally, so even if someone got your password, they need to actually steal files to use it. There are things, there are key files you can use, meaning it's a form of two-factor authentication. You put in your master password and it needs to locate another file that you can have on a USB drive or something that it'll only log you in if you also have that file. There are a few other techniques that will protect your password manager quite well.
Coming up, we actually have an interview with Rob DiNuzzo. Their company, Siber Systems, put out a list of 10 security tips for Cybersecurity Awareness Month in October. And we thought, we should kind of carry that forward, not just in October, but the rest of the year. So we discussed some of those tips, and hopefully you guys find them useful. I noticed that you guys put out 10 security tips for National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. So for our podcast listeners, we thought it'd be interesting to just kind of run through those 10 tips. So the first tip that's on here is when using a debit card, run it as a credit card. So just wondered maybe you could explain a little bit why you should do that.
Sure. Ideally, we tell people, especially when traveling abroad or making large purchases or shopping online, that if they have the choice, they should use a credit card over a debit card because it does offer a lot more protection from fraud than a debit card does. However, if you are using a debit card and you're at the point of sale in a store, a retail outlet, restaurant, we do recommend you run it as a credit card. Not only will you get those great points that all the credit card companies continually offer us, but you'll get a little bit better protection from your bank, depending on your bank, obviously, if there is to be a fraudulent purchase. Plus, you'll never have to enter in your PIN number, which can also be compromised. Let's say in the Target hack that happened earlier this year, or in the Home Depot hack, PIN numbers were also compromised. So we tell people not to use a debit card as a debit card unless they feel very confident about where they're shopping. And it's also not running it as credit will not allow it to. Running a credit card is not linked directly to your bank account, so there's a finite amount of risk that you're taking on when using a credit card, whereas with a debit card, you would be taking on a lot more risk by using it. But that being said, do keep in mind where you're shopping. If you're shopping at a small local establishment, keep in mind that their fees are higher when they run credit cards over debit cards. So you may want to take that into consideration as debit card transactions are cheaper for local merchants to use.
All right, moving on to number 2 then. This is a tip that I thought was kind of interesting. It says don't click the unsubscribe link in your spam emails.
Obviously, the knee-jerk reaction when you get a suspicious-looking email or unrecognized email into your inbox is to click unsubscribe. That's actually played into a lot of hackers and scammers' plans because that link is not actually an unsubscribe link. It just says unsubscribe and hyperlinks to somewhere where you might get spyware or you might get a virus or you might have something placed on your computer from there. So what we tell you to do instead is to just simply move that email into your junk folder. If you do not want it anymore and it is not from a recognized source. Now, obviously, if it's coming from a large retail outlet that you just don't want their emails anymore, I would say clicking unsubscribe is relatively safe. But if it's from an unknown source, if you're being offered money from some foreign prince, I would not click the unsubscribe link. I would actually just move it right into the spam folder so you're not clicking on a malicious link.
All right, and the next tip is use a different password for each secure site and change it every 30 to 60 days. I think that's probably everyone's sort of least favorite tip because everyone hates changing their passwords.
Well, obviously, using a different password for each site that you log into is very important because if one site gets hacked, you don't want all of your other logins to be compromised. So, I've seen people that use the same password and the same login address for their bank account and, let's say, an online magazine subscription. So if that magazine subscription were to be compromised, your password for your bank account would also be compromised. So it just leads to a whole bunch of other issues that could come about. So it's just easier to use a different password for each site. And obviously you want to change it every 30 to 60 days because most often when we hear about a data breach on a website, we hear about it significantly after it actually happens. So rarely do we hear about a hack that happened yesterday. Usually we'll hear about it when it happened 2, 3, 4 months ago. And by that time, your password probably has already been compromised. So we do say change your passwords every 30 to 60 days. And obviously some sites you can go longer than that. Some sites will automatically prompt you to change it every 60 days. I know my bank account does. So it really just depends on the individual site itself, but I would say 30 to 60 days, but definitely use a different password for each site that you log into.
Yeah, and this next tip, tip number 5 on your list, kind of made me laugh because I used to have an old boss, and anytime we left our computer on without locking it, they put a little sticky on there, saying that, oh, we just had a violation. So the tip is don't leave desktops or laptops unattended in the office with a browser open.
Yeah, so especially when you're looking at a larger company where you have several people going in and out of the office on a given day, not only can someone get your password from a desktop that's been left unlocked, but they can also hack into the system of your company and get to sensitive data from there. So definitely always lock your computer whenever you're away from your desk, even if it's just to get up to go to the bathroom or get up to go to lunch or something. We still recommend that you do lock that. And this also goes for personal laptops and desktops. If you're in Starbucks and you're using your laptop and you leave it there to go get another coffee, it only takes a matter of seconds for someone to get in there and take something that could hurt you down the line. So we definitely say lock your laptop or desktop wherever you go if you're not with it.
Yeah, and following up on that, the next tip is to password protect mobile phones and tablets. And that kind of surprises me in that so many people that I know don't take that step, and increasingly, smartphone's pretty much like a computer. It's got all my information on there, so it surprises me how many people don't bother putting a pin or anything on their devices.
Sure. If you think about all the personal information that's stored on a personal device, it's astounding that people don't use passwords or PIN numbers or some of the new biometric scanning that some of the newer phones have with fingerprint to lock their phones. I mean, it's the same thing happens, except if it's stolen, somebody can hack into it pretty easily. And we also recommend, along with this tip, using if your phone is stolen or lost, to call your phone company right away and have them send a kill switch to it, which will actually destroy all the information on it. So definitely be aware and think of it like a credit card. If you lose it or misplace it, if you can't find it within a couple moments or you don't really think you're going to find it, definitely call and have all of your data and have the phone locked permanently.
Oh yeah, now on to tip number 7 here. It's kind of a big one. Don't fall for phishing scams. I guess to me that's kind of easier said than done because some of them are pretty sophisticated, but I don't know if you have any kind of advice on how to not fall for them.
Sure. When we hear the word phishing, we often think of emails, phishing to get your personal information or phishing for you to click like we talked earlier. But there are still very many scammers that use traditional phone lines to try to scam people. A good example was my grandparents actually received a call from someone claiming to be their grandson, which would have been me, asking them to wire money to me. Now, obviously, that may work with some people, and that's just a good example of how people don't ever send money to someone that you don't know, essentially. And to be aware of that scams can happen not only online, but they still do happen on the phone. So do be aware of that, and just confirm things and use common sense in a lot of cases. And the other great phishing scam that we've all heard of is, you've won a large inheritance from some prince overseas. Click here to enter your bank account information. Obviously, hopefully everyone knows that is a scam, but do keep an eye out for those. Like you said, they are getting more sophisticated, and they may just be offering you a $20 gift card to an electronics store or something. But if something's too good to be true, it usually is would be the takeaway from this.
And in terms of phone scams, I've actually had a couple times this year where I've gotten a call from Chase Fraud Protection and telling me that my account is compromised. But then I actually called Chase to follow up on it, and it turns out, that's just a pretty common scam that goes around. So that's another thing to kind of keep in mind is just when you get calls and stuff from businesses, to always try to contact them directly, because a lot of times they're pretty familiar with the scams that are going out there that are tied to their organizations.
Sure. And another popular scam that's been around, especially in the last few months, has been the IRS supposedly calling and telling you that you owe back taxes and then asking you for a wire transfer. Don't fall for that. That's one of the most popular ones nowadays over the phone. So do be aware. If somebody calls you claiming to be the IRS, it's probably not them.
All right, we got 3 tips left to go through. Tip number 8 is consider a password management system. I kind of wanted to ask you about this because I guess I'd never used a password management system until about a year ago, and now that I use it, I can't imagine living without it. It would just be impossible to manage all my passwords otherwise. So I'm curious if you have any insight into why people don't use password management systems. I guess I was one of those people as well, but until recently.
Sure. Well, obviously, password managers are great, and our company has a password manager called RoboForm, and What it does is it allows you to save all of your passwords under one master password, as we call it. So talking a few tips ago, we talked about how you should have a unique password for every website that you log into, and you should change it pretty often. Obviously, with most people having upwards of 20 or 30 different logins that they have, remembering a strong, unique password for each of those can be a very daunting task. So people tend to just stack their passwords and use the same ones over and over. But with a password manager, you can actually generate strong and secure passwords and then save them into that account and never have to remember or type them again, which is really the forte of what RoboForm does. Is it allows you to just enter your one master password and securely log into all of the sites within your account that you log into on a daily basis, everything from Amazon to your credit cards and bank accounts and everything in between. And it also allows you to download the apps and take them with you because we all know how daunting it is to try to type in or remember a password for a mobile device once you're inside of it and, you're trying to log in. You can't type the password. It takes you forever to remember. You have to try to reset it. It takes the hassle out of it and does keep you more secure by giving you the option to use a unique password for every site that you log into and to change it more easily. To your question, why people don't use password managers, I think some people don't know that they're out there, and that's the case with any kind of software that kind of makes life more convenient or more secure, is that we really want to get the word out there that everyone should be using a password manager, whether it's ours or one of the other ones, just to keep themselves safe online and to keep their passwords more secure. So I think people might be afraid to save their passwords to a third-party software, but it is very secure. We've had numerous security audits done and everything like that. So you should feel more secure about saving it into a password manager than you should saving it into, when your browser pops up asking you, would you like to save this password? We don't recommend doing that because there's not a lot of safeguards in place on the back end of that. So it's definitely a very secure thing, and we hope everyone can get out there and save their passwords and be more secure.
Then going on to the next tip, it kind of, has to do with, sort of spreading that knowledge. It's, make sure that employees know how to keep information safe. We're talking a lot about tips, but I think in terms of, businesses being secure, you got to sort of make sure that the employees actually know those tips and are following them.
Definitely. And we talk about the bring your own device back and forth that a lot of companies go through. Should companies allow employees to use their own personal devices on a work network or doing work for their office? The main issue with that is I personally agree that you should be able to use your own device responsibly. You're only as strong as your weakest link in your network or in your system. So if someone on your network was to install a malicious app, that could possibly compromise all of the data on all of the other devices used within the office. So I think education is the biggest thing from a company perspective. Educate your employees on how to properly protect themselves online and protect the data and the company data online. So I do agree that people should be able to use their personal devices as long as it's in a secure environment and as long as they're educated about how to be properly secure.
All right, and then on to the final tip that you guys have. It's number 10, regularly update software to eliminate security weaknesses. Can you just talk a little bit about that? Yeah, so obviously we've all seen pop-ups on our computer. Actually, there's a couple going off right now on mine that say update X and X, update your Windows, update your browser, update your RoboForm. We launch updates all the time. But really, those are very important most of the time because they do patch security holes, they eliminate security weaknesses, and it's very important too. It can be a hassle to go through and, in some cases restart your computer or have to go through and save all the work that you're doing and close out of your browser to update it. But it's really worth it because you don't want to be using an outdated version of a software because that outdated version likely and most often does not contain the most recent security patches that it may have. So those are very important to update no matter what the software is, whether it be anything from your Windows operating system or your Mac operating system all the way down to a piece of software that you use within that system. So we definitely recommend updating your software regularly, especially if it's a security update. All right, well, that's it for the tips this week. Thanks for taking the time, Rob. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
All right, that's it for this week's Cybercrime and Business Podcast. Please follow us on iTunes, YouTube, or wherever else you listen. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like covered, email us at contact@hacksurfer.com.